Warpugs. So, One Man's Fall, a verbal account of 1099, the year of Ultimate Heresy. Now, this is Trench Crusade. This is the next installment of Trench Crusade that I'm taking a look at. I asked for, when I first started looking at this, I asked for the kind of a catalyst. What led to all what we were seeing in Trench Crusade. And Notorious Griffin set it up for us. He requested it in the Discord. He said, this is when the timeline in Trench Crusade begins. So, we're going to take a look at this. Now, I do not know all that much about Trench Crusade. I don't know. I just don't. So, there are going to be some things that I am going to have some questions on. Of course, coming into any kind of franchise, that's going to be... that's going to be number one. I'm going to have questions about most, if not everything, that I'm seeing. Now, some of it I'm going to be able to infer, but I will ask questions. Please provide the answers down below, or even better, go to the Discord and send me on that direction. So we're about to get into this. Links are going to be in the description below, and this was made by Scannerbarkly, and I think right now he's the only one really doing Trench Crusade lore that I've been seeing so far. So we're going to jump right in. Warpugs, thank you for sending me on this direction. I've been liking it ever since I first heard about it. Let's get into it.
What follows is an account of the events of 1099, that year most foul, the fall of Jerusalem, and the opening of the gates of Inferno by the heretical traitor Godfrey of Bouillon. This is a record of the spoken testimony of the most highly decorated former Lieutenant Craig MacDonough of the Planters Alba Assault Squad, witnessed by one of the ecclesiastic administrators of the New Antioch Military Hospice. The monk who transcribed this report has been deafened, blinded, and had his tongue removed.
What?
Records showed the lieutenant had not been seen since he and his unit were sent on a dangerous patrol near Bethlehem in 1907. He returned to New Antioch alone in 1912, although he claimed to have only been gone from the city for 2 months. The lieutenant was picked up for preaching heresy on the street by members of the Office of the Propagation of Virtue and brought to the hospice due to his military uniform.
Okay.
He was originally scheduled for execution, although I have delayed this while we study the man. There is the potential to learn much from him. To be clear, the origins of the account are claimed to be infernal in nature and should not be discussed with anyone outside of the room where this document is to be read. MacDonough has been locked away in restricted confinement until such time as we are satisfied that we have all pertinent details, upon which his execution shall be carried out via whatever means prove effective. Testimony begins. It was a cold night, and the squad and I were confident that we were alone for miles around, so we hunkered down in the ruins of a small town. We found a house that was still somewhat standing, easily defensible, and with good lines of sight to all compass points. The fireplace was still intact, so a small fire was lit to chase away the brutal chill of the desert night. Everything went as usual, with scouts and shifts assigned. The men ate some rations and ensured the readiness of their arms. Then those who could settled down to get some sleep. Just as I was beginning to doze off, a voice rang out, carrying well despite seeming to whisper. Merhaban de camp. Might a friend and co-belligerent of the damned approach and fear no threat? Arthur, one of my men on watch, signalled to me that he had sight of the speaker, so I made my way slowly to his window to look out. In the pale moonlight beyond, I could just make out the shape of a man, indistinct in the flowing desert clothes that marked him as a citizen of the Iron Sultanate. Approach, I called, yet do so slowly. I signalled to the rest of the men to ready themselves for a potential combat. To a man, they took up their positions with some kind of angle towards the outside,
Okay.
waiting for any potential surprises. The stranger in the dark came forward slowly, hands raised without being asked. I am alone, he said, have no fear. He slowly came to the door and then stepped inside. He wore the pointed metal helmet and red turban of an Azab. On his back was an ornate Jezail rifle, and at his side a wicked curved sword. He was, to be fair, impressively built, clearly heavily muscled beneath the pale desert clothing, and he sported a long beard that had not seen beard oil for some time. His clothes were dusty but not dirty, and his ceremonial holster on his hip was empty. On his other hip he carried a curious iron box, about a foot long and 8 inches wide. "Merban, new friends," he said, raising and turning his raised palms outward, then lowering them to his waist, pointing up, the signal that had become common on the Levant when soldiers of New Antioch and those from the Sultanate met. "Well met. You may call me Farouk of the Iron Wall." He grinned, and despite my trepidations, I found myself relaxing. He had opened himself up to death by approaching us, and his familiarity with the military customs that had taken root among the troops of the righteous in the Levant eased my mind. I suspected he had been cut off from his unit, or perhaps they had been killed in a run-in with a heretic band. The desert night was no place to be alone, even for those who were born to it. The elements and nature were one thing. The denizens that stalked the shadows were entirely another.
Okay.
Thinking about it, were I out there alone, I would have done the same myself for fear of what might awake me in the dark. I introduced myself, and we sat and talked for a while. It turned out that he had neither lost his squad nor had they perished. He was scouting for them and was in fact their captain.
Okay.
I had heard of this tradition among the soldiers of the Sultanate, and I respected it greatly. The leaders would often take the toughest work and the most dangerous assignments, showing their dedication and loyalty to their troops. I had never heard of a squad of Azebs breaking on the front lines, and I suspected that this was part of the reason why. We shared some rations and got to talking.
Respect for your leadership goes a long way, and a good leader can make a huge difference in the way that a unit functions.
The conversation seemed to flow easily. The men and I relaxed in the presence of a new person to engage with. We had been deep in the desert for months now, and we were eager for any news that Farouk might have. After some time, I realized that the squad and I were readily answering his questions, but had yet to really get much information in return. When asked a question, Farouk would laugh, smooth his beard, and give a short answer before once again inquiring about us and our lives. He was warm and jovial, easy to talk with, but I found myself growing more and more curious about that strange iron box at his waist. It seemed like madness to me to carry such a heavy weight in a desert when one could carry food or water, and I had never seen an Azeb carry something like it before. After a while, I realized that I could not pull my eyes from the box, and my mind began to think of nothing else. I looked around the room and I noticed Arthur and the other men glancing toward the box, obviously harboring questions of their own. Eventually, I could contain my interest no more, and I asked Farouk about it. "My newest friend," he said, "these are things that you shouldn't want to know, and this box contains them." He did not seem angry at being asked, and his eyes gleamed with curiosity as if he wondered if that would be enough to stop my inquiry. Foolishly, I let my desire for knowledge push me on, and I insisted on knowing more about the box. Some of the men chimed in, pushing the issue. It seems that whatever desire I had to learn more about the box was echoing amongst my men. Eventually, he sighed.
Curiosity is going to be... This is going... Curiosity leads to some very bad things. That's where it's fun for the Imperium, because it says the Imperium is so against people, investigating that part of their human nature, being curious about things, trying to investigate things. I guess Trench Crusade hasn't quite gotten there yet, where they're just that psychotic about avoiding, questioning what stuff is. You're better off not knowing.
In an almost exaggerated sense of exasperation, as a father dealing with inquisitive children, and he held his box in mock defeat. He undid the heavy rope that tied the box around his waist, placing it on the floor with a dull thud. The top contained 3 studs, and he knelt down and moved them left and right repeatedly in a smooth combination that I could not follow. My men crowded around, curious, the potential dangers of the desert forgotten. Farouk looked up at us and asked us if we really wished to know what was in the box. To a man, we said yes, and how I wish now even one of us had said no. If someone had denied that wretched desire, perhaps I'd still be the man I was then, safe in my ignorance. Farouk folded down the side of the box, and inside was a human head. It was severed at the neck, eyes open, the mark of a Templar cut into its forehead over and over again, and a brutal, jagged scar ran down the centre of its face, seeming to cut it almost perfectly in half. One half of the face proceeded to laugh, while the other began to cry. I gasped and took a step back, the dead eyes of the head following me, mouth turning into a snarl. New friends, Farouk? New sheep to the slaughter? The head howled, and I felt a chill spread deep within my soul.
That's a bad sign.
Meet my oldest friend, Amis. He is surely evil, but he keeps me safe. Do you not, Amis? The pack stands, Farouk. I realized that I was sitting down now. My legs had collapsed beneath me, bringing me uncomfortably close to the head as it spat foul-sounding words at Farouk. These words were in a language I did not know, but yet they had the power to make my skin crawl. Farouk, how can you carry this thing? It is heretical, infernal. It should be passed to the synod or to the school of the Meteoric Omen. How can you keep this thing with you? How can you damn your soul in such a way? Farouk looked at me, eyes seeming sad, as if he was about to tell me would damn me too. I have no choice, my friend. I must do what I must do, as now must you. Amish was present in Jerusalem. He was there when they committed the heresy and opened the gate. A Templar turned traitor. Do you understand what this means? This creature was there when the world changed and witnessed the greatest weakness of man.
Oh.
He was present for the great upending. I looked around the room at my men, and they met my gaze with horror and dread. I wanted to command them to cut down Farouk, to smash the infernal head to pieces, to fall to our knees to beg forgiveness of God, or should he fail to find us worthy for his most benign damnation. I could do nothing but sit and listen as the unholy truth threatened to choke me with its weight. I looked at Amis, the still living severed head, twisted and distorted with two faces, and I felt the heat of damnable flames behind its eyes. Yes, he said, I was there at Jerusalem. I followed Godfrey of Bouillon over the wall. After years of watching our army wither away to almost nothing, we found the weakness in the walls of God's city and we attacked at night. Driven on by the weak who had died and the cowards who had returned to Europe, those of us who stayed found victory waiting on those walls, and then we found even more. We rolled through the streets of Jerusalem like an avenging angel, slaughtering Jew and Muslim alike. Thousands of them fell to our blades, and we delighted in it. The Lord's rule had once again returned to Jerusalem. We made our way to the side of the first temple. I walked the blood-slick streets with Godfrey, and I saw the mad look in his eyes. We were drawn to that place like moths to a flame. I could not even tell you how we found ourselves heading downward through corridors and stairways and caves, until eventually we came to a large chamber that crawled with shadow and seemed...
So this timeline deviates right at the finale of the First Crusade. Oh boy, okay.
to kill every sound that occurred within. In the centre of the chamber was a stone plinth, blackened by time, and upon that plinth rested the most incredible object I had ever seen. Now, Amish's voice grew quiet and tentative. A perfect sphere, he said, that no man could have made, cold to the touch, yet seeming to emanate a soft heat. To focus on the surface was to lose yourself, and if you stared too long, you would swear that you could see a moving scale, or a blinking eye, or a flickering flame. It seemed we all saw something different. Those who stared too long told me that they were looking at themselves from within the sphere, that only the inside was real and the outside was an illusion. Some claimed that inside the sphere was a dream or a world beyond our own. When I looked inside, I knew not what I saw, but I heard it whisper to me, inviting for me to look for longer. We knew instantly what it represented, although we tried not to think about it, to chase those thoughts from our minds. 100 of us gathered there, and we waited for Godfrey to speak, all the while feeling the presence of the sphere grow stronger in our hearts, the words grow louder in our minds. After what seemed like hours, he stood, and I felt his words arrive in my head almost before he spoke them. I knew that what he spoke was truth, straight to my heart, to my very soul. We had fought for years to bring God's light to Jerusalem, sent on holy crusade to free this most holy place from the filth that inhabits it. We had suffered and starved and frozen, left our beloved ones behind to watch our friends die, to be betrayed by the machinations of the ungrateful church, to be all but abandoned at the gates of Jerusalem. But we did it all because Christ commanded, and yet here we were, and in all that time we had not felt his presence, nor had we heard his words. The deed was done. We had debased ourselves as animals to ensure that the holy city would fall under his domain, and still he would not appear to us, would not let us know that we had secured our places amongst his chosen. We had done the impossible, Godfrey said. Us, not the Almighty. Us. And what was waiting for us when we got here? Our reward, power. A new crusade for a master who would love us and venerate us and hold us close. And what must we do to ensure this power? Everything that we had already done. Every step that we had already taken. Every sword we had already swung. Just a little more of it. We would turn sinner into sacrifice and reap the rewards that awaited us. We rounded up every man, woman and child that we could find, and we marched them one by one into the deep tunnels, and we slit their throats above the plinth. Not a single...
When... This is the problem with the promise of reward. This is a problem with it. Because at any point you can sit there and take a look at if you promise someone something, such as the priests and the bishops and the Pope did, and promised eternal life, promised this, promised that, they get there and there's nothing certain, then certainty is going to be the first thing that people clasp onto. Even if that certainty is horrible. Even if that certainty is just god-awful. People will cling to certainty above anything else. I hope I'm making sense with that. Because even though they knew what they were doing was horrific, they still did it because they wanted to be sure.
Single drop of blood landed on it, for it was all sucked away into the sphere, an insatiable hunger demanding more and more and more. From the sphere we felt a flood of gratitude, of thanks. Here, with a simple act, with a single death, was more proof of acceptance by our new Lord than we had received throughout our entire crusade.
Oh, boy.
We had fought for God and received nothing. And when we realized that it was not God who had called us here, the weak really had died or gone home to hide beneath the skirts of Mother Church. Only the true Templars remained, and we had found our new liege. We turned our backs on God, and we did so willingly, for he was false and his words were lies and his promises were ashes delivered by the voices of snakes. At some point, I know not how many sacrifices it took. The sphere seemed to have enough. It expanded outwards, engulfing us. On the other side of the crystalline wall I saw things I still cannot explain. Sights of brutal wonder that set my very soul alight. I saw shapes I could not describe nor understand, and colours I have seen neither before nor since. My eyes were delighted with sounds that I couldn't comprehend, and ecstasy and agony filled me up, top to toe. Eventually, we could take no more. As one, we raised our blades to our own throats, delighted and fortunate to make one final show of power to our new lord. We would defeat death. We dragged our blades across our throats, chopping and carving until our heads came clear of our bodies, yet still we lived. Through our new faith, our sacrifice, we would live forever. I witnessed my own body eaten by creatures I could not describe, and yet I cared not. They could have what I no longer required. I knew I was above them. I knew I was esteemed. A Mrs. voice filled with a tenderness and passion that disgusted me, and I longed to shut his words out of my mind. I could no longer help myself. I threw up, deep and wretched, as if trying to expel this evil from my very being. How could the Templars have done this? How could some of those with the strongest fate have fallen so low? I looked to my waist, seeing my gun and my knife. I longed to grab them and kill these foul, benighted demons, but my hands would not move. Farouk spoke, as if he could read my mind. Forget your thoughts of valor, friend. Ask yourself simply, have you ever heard the voice of your Lord? Have you ever witnessed his presence or his power in a true sense? Or has his miracle always worked through another? Has his word always arrived to other ears? Did they live better than you, more comfortable than you? Did their family want for less, and did their children receive more? Ask yourself, why did your tyrant king abandon you? Why did he leave you here with me? I looked into Farouk's eyes then, and I knew who or what I truly looked at. Not a man at all, merely the shape of a man. And not a human being at all, merely the echo of one. Who are you, demon? I would know your name so I might curse it. My bravery was pageantry and pantomime. I would have fled screaming, abandoning my men, had I been able to move at all.
This is why the Inquisition will kill anybody that learns anything about chaos. You just don't want to know about this kind of stuff. You don't want to even begin to figure it out, because the second you start to rationalize it out in your head, you're already screwed. You're already 110% screwed. And I think that's one of the best things about 40K. And I'm seeing the same thing here with Trench Crusade.
Farouk smiled again. That strange, comfortable smile, and something about him changed. His posture altered. The set of his face changed, and a cold and calculating look fell in behind his previously warm eyes. I found that I could no longer meet them, and I cast my own to the floor in fear. If a name is required, he said, then you may call me Nabarus. But you have yet to answer my question. Why has your lord abandoned you, led you here, to me, to this?
Oh man, this just gets good. This is getting worse and worse. So this guy is just there recruiting. He's not there. He's not there to fight. He's not there to do anything other than to recruit current soldiers over to his side. Wow.
If a name is required, he said, then you may call me Nabarus.
I had to rewind a little bit,
You've
guys.
yet to answer my question. Why has your lord abandoned you, led you here, to me, to this? I thought back to all my years in this damnable war. So many injuries, so many lost comrades, all that death, all that suffering, to bring me to this place, to an enemy I couldn't fight and a battle I couldn't win. Farouk was like you once, proud and petulant. Nibirius knelt in front of me, gently lifting my head by the chin to meet him eye to eye. He is my creature now, because he knew his truth, that he did not want to die. And Amis is also my creature. Together, they find me those who might be worthy of a place in my legions.
Recruiters.
Or those who deserve more than they get. I do not need to see into your soul to see your pride, to see all that you have given up for a lord that will not save you. Could he not strike me down in this moment to save you? Could he not drive me from this vessel to save Farouk? Yet he does not, and he has not for hundreds of years. Do not think that he has any love for you, for that is not what he offers. All my own quiet moments of doubt flooded me. Time in the trenches or running across the open desert, driving my blade into some heretic's face or ducking the chitinous arm of a monstrous creature. Moments where death had nearly claimed me, and the only thing that kept me alive was my wits and my skill. I had done so much and given so much for what? For torture and terror and the damnable truth. I was alone. I felt my thoughts twisting in my head, and Nibirius reached out and touched me on the forehead. His touch burned, seeming to pass through my skin, deep into my organs, deep inside my soul. And I knew the truth for what it was. God did not love me. I was not one of his chosen. Despite all my deeds and all that I had fought for, he had never thought to touch my life, to grant me even the briefest moment of his attention. What had I ever done to slight him? What sacrifice had been too little? What sin had been too much? The ever-knowing, the omnipotent, the absent. I started to weep then, this terrible truth crushing the air from my lungs, threatening to destroy me utterly. There is one who could love you, as flawed and as human as you are. A Mrs. Silky's sibilant voice filled the room. My men looked at me, and they had all been witnesses to my fall. They stared at me with horror on their faces, and I knew that this love was not meant for them. A love that embraces all is a love that embraces nobody. This was just for me, and me alone. Freed of false faith in a God who had forsaken me, I took my knife from its sheath, and I plunged it into the body of the nearest man.
Oh my God.
I could not tell you which of them died first, but I remember that Arthur died last. I looked down at him as he, like all the others, was held by the same heavy chains of false fate that Amis and Farouk and Nibirius had freed me of. I held his face in my hands, and I kissed his forehead before plunging my knife deep into his neck. I watched the blood run down his chest and onto the floor. I looked into his eyes as the life drained from him, seeing only torment and uncertainty there. Betrayal because he could not understand my evolution. I realized the room was empty. Just me and the bodies of my fallen squad who lay where I had slain them. None of them had moved. None of them had been able to realize what I grasped or had been able to embrace what I had. Nibirius and Amis were gone. But that mattered not. Where they were of no consequence. It only mattered that they had been here for a brief time to free me from my burdens. I realized then that this gift should be given to others.
Oh,
Rather
yay.
than slink into the shadows as so many others had done, I opted instead to come here, to New Antioch, to preach, to lift the veil from the eyes of the foolish who believe, to save as many as I can from your tyrant God. I do not fear you, nor do I fear him. You would call me damned, and will kill me, knowing that my soul will go to hell. I would call that salvation. For I know that what awaits me there is power and prestige, and all the things that you would deny me in this life. If my message is not to be heard, if the truth that I know is not to be spread, then I will go happily from this life, knowing that, at the very end, the veil was lifted from my eyes, and I saw your tyrant God for a liar, and you all as charlatans. The testimony ends. The subject is willing to engage us in any questions we have, but he has no knowledge of hell other than its agents that he himself has witnessed. He knows no plans and can offer no intelligence on military strategy. Curiously, he neither eats nor drinks. At first we left him food, but he never partook. We stopped nearly a year ago, and he has never needed any, nor asked for any since.
Wow,
We have cut
okay.
the tendons of his arms and legs to ensure that he cannot escape. We expect that there is much experimentation that can be done on this former man under the right circumstances. Every instinct I have screams that we should execute him if we can find a way, and failing that, we should wall him up in the dungeons of the hospice. I await your word and counsel from the Holy See, and until then I have instructed nobody to enter his cell upon pain of death.
Okay. This is why in 40K, if you step outside the bounds, you're gonna get smacked down. That's what happens to you. With the deck this stacked, I mean, I don't know how it's possible that the forces of hell haven't just simply run roughshod over the rest of the world. It just seems like so far, it just seems like there has been little to no ability to push back against this. Wow, this is something. If you're hearing a beep in the background, my wife is taking care of something and it's making something beep. But everything in this just seems to be it seems so one-sided. And I'm just really curious what the forces look like on the other side. What it actually looks like, because it just looks so absolutely one-sided right now in terms of the power distribution and everything like it. And this war has been going on since the First Crusade. So what in the world has been happening? How has the church held on? Because at every single turn that I see is just insane power, just an insane power difference here. And it's mainly because I haven't heard anything from the other side. Warpugs, this is Trench Crusade. It is far different than anything I've seen before. Scannerbarkly did an amazing job putting this story out. Check his channel out in the description down below. Subscribe to me if you haven't already. Leave a comment and join the channel as a member or a patron. I will catch you guys next time. And please, somebody tell me that this isn't as one-sided as I think. Is it so far seems to be.